You can learn a person's story, stand at their cross, and feel something. But what if you could take one step back with them, out of the cemetery and into the place where they actually fought? When you read a name, when you learn about them, do you ever wonder what they went through? This is the story of some of the 101st Airborne men who fought in the Bastogne sector during the winter of 1944 and 1945. The stories of men who never made it home. I'm standing in front of the Bois Jacques forest. These are the positions that Easy Company held during the Battle of the Bulge. This is where their foxholes are, the real life locations. This is also the spot where the war ended for Sergeant Muck and PFC Penkala, when that artillery barrage came screaming down and hit directly on their foxhole. If you've watched my video at the American Cemetery in Luxembourg, you know that we stood at the crosses of these two individuals. Now we're nearby the actual location where the shell came down on their foxhole. See, on the 10th of January, 1945, the artillery barrage here was intense throughout this forest. You might remember this was depicted in the series Band of Brothers. In this scene, George Lutz is crawling towards their foxhole, trying to get into cover. He is just feet away when a shell lands directly inside Muck and Penkala's position. Though the scene was depicted on the series, this is based off a real-life event. Both men were killed instantly. Standing out here in these quiet woods today, it's almost hard to imagine the violence that occurred in December 1944 and January of 45. One second, these two men were here. The next, they were gone. Now, I can't tell you exactly which foxhole Sergeant Muck and PFC Penkala would have been in when the explosion came down on top of them, simply because there's no way for me to find out exactly which one it was. However, it would have been similar to many of the foxholes that are behind me, where Easy Company dug in here in this location. It's crazy to think about that the Battle of the Bulge was going on 81 years ago from today. And the time of the recording, it's shortly before Christmas. And the weather is a complete opposite of what Easy Company would have been experiencing in these foxholes here. Instead of freezing weather, snowy grounds, we're having sunny weather. My jacket's a little too warm today. It's just crazy contrast from how it really was. Walking through the forest today, it's hard to imagine the chaos and fear that would have been felt by the members of Easy Company as the artillery shells were pounding down on this area. Now it's just a quiet forest in Belgium where you can come and pay your respects. But as I walk through here, I'm trying to imagine what it would be like, and it's an emotional experience here. Just knowing that the hardship that these men went through, and you're standing on the actual ground where they were. Wow. Standing here on the edge on the side of the road, from my position facing southeast, you can see a lot of these foxholes here in that direction. And then if you head towards north from my position, you'll see the town of Foy down the hill. So it's not hard to imagine in your head where the German positions might have been from here. So roughly east of this position, Easy Company went on a patrol, and that's when PFC John Julian got shot in the neck, from most accounts saying it was by machine gun fire. You might remember this scene depicted in Band of Brothers. Julian is one of the stories we covered at the American Cemetery in Luxembourg. And he's definitely one of the stories that need to be remembered. And it was not far from here where he unfortunately lost his life at such a young age. So just an edit one day later, I looked it up to the area where Easy Company might have done that patrol, and I'm walking in the forest right now where Julian was unfortunately hit in the neck on that patrol. It's hard to picture it now where everything's looking green and luscious, but picture yourself there during the last winter of the war. It would have been snow-covered, freezing temperatures. Easy Company would have gone out here somewhere on a patrol. It was during that patrol where Julian was hit in the neck by machine gun fire. If you've seen that scene of Band of Brothers, you might recall he gets hit near the logs and falls down. As they try to crawl to him, the members of Easy Company can't reach him because they're under intense machine gun fire. I am no means an expert on PFC Julian's life, but one thing I noticed was that patrol where he was shot on occurred on the 21st of December, 1944, and his headstone over at the American Cemetery in Luxembourg reads the 1st of January, 1945. That was just an interesting fact that I thought I would pick out and mention. Just to add some extra context about the differences between the patrol date and the date listed on Julian's headstone. His headstone lists January 1st, 1945, the official date recorded in many Army-style records. But multiple unit research sources link his fatal wounding to the December 21st, 1944 patrol in the Bois Jacques. January 1st likely reflects a later administrative died of wounds declared dead date, and possibly the timing of his temporary burial or reburial. So that could possibly be why the memorial and his headstone in Luxembourg don't match. Just a side note, if you do come to the Bois Jacques to see the Easy Company Foxholes, go to the Bastogne War Museum first to purchase a ticket, because you're gonna have to present the ticket to get into this section of the forest because it's fenced off. You can't pay only for the Foxholes, you have to pay for the entire museum ticket, which was about 22 euros at the time of recording. Now take this with a grain of salt. I'm referencing a tour I had, so I'm going off memory here. But it would be around this area here, or somewhere over here, where Dick Winters had his command post. So if you take a look behind me on the trail over there in the distance, you see the Bois Jacques and the Easy Company Foxholes. And over here would have been the command post. So you see that he wouldn't have had that far of a way to go, but still a short distance away. Yeah, there's not much to see out here today. In fact, there's absolutely nothing, but it's kind of cool to stand near that area where it would have been. And you would assume that Dick Winters would either have walked this way or gone through this forest to reach his men, to check up on his men, and to see how they were doing. Just behind me is the Easy Company Memorial. I was recently watching a YouTube channel named History in Your Hand, and he makes the point of saying this isn't the exact spot where Easy Company was originally dropped off as they made their way to the Bois Jacques, but it's among roads like this. It would have been a similar scene where they got off the trucks and they headed into the forest just behind me to dig the foxholes. Now, as the channel mentions, it's impossible to know the exact spot where that scene in Band of Brothers was depicted, but you can imagine it was among roads like this and among scenery like this behind me. By the way, that channel also has a really detailed video about Easy Company and the foxholes in the Bois Jacques, so you should also go check that out if you want to learn about it. So in the scope of this video, I only covered those members who are buried at the American Cemetery over in Luxembourg. However, they are among 14, and all 14 of those individuals deserve to be honored. The eagle will always scream for our fallen brothers. The Bois Jacques is remembered today because Easy Company became one of the most visible faces of the Bastogne fight. But the defense of Bastogne was a much larger picture. The 101st Airborne held the core of the perimeter, and they did alongside other units that were thrown into the line around the town, especially Combat Command B of the 10th Armored Division. Earlier in the battle, the 28th Infantry Division also helped slow the German advance and buy time for Bastogne to be reinforced. I wish I could cover more of the stories that are connected to this fight that fought around this area, because every cross in the Luxembourg and surrounding cemeteries has a story behind it. This video is part of my multi-part Bastogne and Luxembourg series covering the perspective of the battle from both the German and the American perspectives. It's important to observe both sides of the story to enhance our historical understanding of the larger picture. So make sure to check out those episodes as well as upcoming videos. Until the next time.